Let's talk more about those market movements with Wayne McCurrie from FNB Wealth and Investments. Wayne, as always, many thanks for your time. Interesting movement on the JSE today. I'm not sure about the volumes, but we were over 0.5% in the green in early afternoon trade, and now we've ended marginally in the red. I'm seeing as we approach the close of the trading day, the biggest laggards were the resources.
Yes, I mean, the resource shares came under a little bit of pressure, falling platinum price, I suppose, the main culprit there. But still a very, very muted movement. I mean, there's nothing particularly untoward about today's movements.
Right, let's talk about the rand. That continues to weaken against major global currencies, Wayne. What would you say are some of the components that are contributing to these movements?
Well, I suppose the real weakness of the rand, which has happened over the last couple of months, has been the fall in the commodity cycle, specifically platinum and iron ore prices. But by and large, I think the rand has done most of its weakness. You know, unless there is a true surprise out of the US tonight, or inflation stays very high in the US, the rand's probably at a fairish level now. I don't foresee much weakness from this level, other than if we get a true big shock on US inflation or US monetary policy.
And of course, as we focus on those global markets, when a lot of market participants are anticipating that that inflation number in the US is going to be quite high.
Yes. Look, I mean, they've had extraordinarily high numbers. You know, the highest has been since the 1980s. And normally that would have already, you know, shocked the equity market. But hopefully it is transitory. In other words, it will come down somewhere in the middle of next year. And that's all very dependent on US wage inflation and commodities, but specifically the oil price. You know, if inflation stays, let's say, above 4% in America by the middle of the year, towards the end of next year, we are going to have a true, very big interest rate increase in America, which will result in, unfortunately, a lot of equity price weakness. And under that scenario, if inflation stays high, which I don't think it will, we will have a significantly weaker rand. So unfortunately, the new year, we can't be terribly optimistic about the new year in respect of market returns.
No, absolutely, Wayne. And of course, while we stick with inflation, we had inflation data coming out here, some of the highest levels we've seen in almost 5 years. This is obviously going to be informing what the Reserve Bank does in the first quarter of the year. And I don't anticipate it's going to be very good news for the South African consumer.
No, we will get at least another let's call it 0.75% increase interest rates next year, probably in the first half of the year. Maybe more to come. But the good news about South African inflation is it's not due to domestic circumstances. In other words, effectively, it's the oil price and Eskom that is pushing it. There's no excess demand in South Africa, and that's very different in the US, where the biggest worry is actually excess demand as expressed by wages going up. So in other words, the inflation in South Africa has got very little to do with South Africa. It's actually external factors mainly. I mean, the inflationary increase in this last month, 80% of it was the price of petrol. So, you know, and that's not to do with domestic circumstances at all. And as you spoke about earlier on in the program, there's no wage inflation out there. I mean, people can't demand wage increases in this type of employment environment. So our inflation is very different from US inflation.
No, absolutely. Wayne McCurrie from FNB Wealth and Investments, many thanks for your time this afternoon. Wayne giving us a wrap of the market. Stay there. And of course, I'll be back in the next bulletin to talk a little bit more about the pressures on the consumers with that data that was released today. I'll have Chief Economist Isa Mhlanga from Alexander Forbes to unpack that data.